Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Eddie Robinson, on-air news host for WNYC and WQXR. And on behalf of the Greene Space, thegreenspace.org, WNYC, WQXR, and our incredible partners, Penn World Voices Festival, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for joining us tonight. The Global Saloon, cities in Brazil.
Morrendo de saudade de você. Quero te sequer, dizer que não posso mais sofrer. Se eu errei, fui castigado. Assim que não pode ser longe de você. Abandonado, 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 longe de você. Abandonado.
Ladies and gentlemen, Gretchen Palato, Nilson Matta, and Hélio Alves. Thank you. This young woman was born in Rio. She received a BA in Literatures of Portuguese Language from the University of Rio de Janeiro. She has a PhD in Spanish American Literature from the University of Sao Paulo, and has taught at Yale University and the UFF in Brazil. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Lidia Santos. How are you, Lidia? Thank you. Thank you. Feel free to have a seat there. Again, we will have our guest here, our panelists. They will be here as well. We're going to have time for one or two more questions later on. So, Lidia, if there are any questions that we want to direct to you, we hope that you'll be available as well to answer.
Okay.
We've been talking about the economic prosperity and the global infrastructure and how it's improved. But many people may not know that its foundation is based on literature, and a lot of literature had an impact on that economic prosperity. I understand that there's something what is called cannibalistic movements. Well, could you explain that to us? Tell us what that's all about and how that influenced, if you will, the economic prosperity of Brazil.
Yes, of course. As a writer and a literature professor, I must say that even the economic boom of Brazil is related to literature. For more develop my rationale, I will invite you to be in Paris in 1920s. Imagine a rich, young, and very smart poet rubbing shoulders with Picasso, with Blaise Cendrars. But suddenly he came across the word primitivism that all these artists were using for justify or for root the techniques, the artistic techniques they are using. I thought that, I think that Oswald de Andrade, his name, came back to Brazil with the idea to respond for this kind of dichotomy, because primitivism can also be an opposition to civilized high culture of Europe. And in 1928, he wrote this Manifesto Antropofágico that is better translated into English as Cannibalist Manifest. And this was the 20s. And the language was, of course, a very humorous, irreverent. And this, in this manifest, he inverted the dichotomy. Instead of being primitive, the Indians became the ancestor, the cultural ancestor of all Brazilians. In doing that, the ritual that was considered the more primitive, that was eating or other human beings, was transforming the center of his metaphor. What that means, using this, he tried to give to young poets, artists of Brazil, a recipe. First, don't be afraid of foreigners. Even they can supposedly be superior to you. Second, learn with them. Be curious about the foreigners. When you are curious about them, you learn with them. And learn, not unlearn, you can eat them.
Wow. What?
If you eat them, because Brazilian Indians, they don't eat the weak warriors. They choose the strongest to be eat. And that's what you do. And if you do that, your digest is a very digestive metaphor. When you eat this culture, the foreign culture, the digestive apparatus will do, you digest them. And your work will be stronger. Your work will be very Brazilian, but stronger, because you pick the most strong warrior that was your enemy.
And the economy gets stronger relative to present-day Brazil.
I think this idea, I feel on the streets, for example, by taxing, the guy says, oh, you are the Yanomamis, you are the Indians. And I say, oh my God, this is very interesting. I have an anecdote, a friend of mine who is economist, who says that what saves Brazil is that even the economists, they never ever really trust the models that come from abroad. Even if you send them to be trained abroad, when they come back, they say, no, maybe you can twist a little bit. We can to adapt, because as the other panelists said, it's so complicated. There's so many different and contradictory interests that you need to combine and to deal with all this. This is a very characteristic of Brazil.
Interesting.
And I think this is,
I understand you have something that you'd like to read to give us an example, if you will, of what cannibalistic, the cannibalistic movement is all about. Let's hear something here.
I have a poem by exactly by Oswald de Andrade, and that means this is a poem from 1925, and the translation was done by Antonio Miranda. Actually, it's in the internet. The name is Mistake of the Portuguese. When the Portuguese arrived in a heavy storm, he dressed the Indian. What a pity. If it had been a sunny morning, the Indian would be undressed the Portuguese. I think this is a kind of the idea that maybe Brazilians can invent or can offer to the world a model, alternative model. I think this is very, very deep in the Brazilians in general. They really believe that they can propose some alternative to the world. And I think this is because this is the best thing we can offer to our globalized era is that idea that you are, that tendency to reject xenophobia, to accept the other, to be curious. The curiosity of Brazilians is unbelievable. I was listening to these panelists. They are inventing every summer In Salvador, I remember this in the 70s, they are inventing a new pass of dance. If you arrive there next year, you lose everything because it's not you learn 1 month, 2 months, and then next year, no, it's another one. You know, this capacity, but this they do by curiosity. They are learning, they are looking at the foreigners. They are not all the times like that. And I think this is another step that our culture are related to the openness to the new. This was Oswald Andrade was looking for when he went to Paris. Where's the new? Where's the modern? The idea of the modern, be modern, is very strong in Brazilians in general. I think it's, and even, I take part now in an anthology of Brazilians. It's actually, the name is Luso-American Literature, was launching in September. And even in the Brazilians that immigrated to the US, you can feel that, because the anthology is composed by Portuguese, Brazilians, and Cape Verdean authors. All the 3 countries that use Portuguese, that write in Portuguese. And when you read the Brazilian part, all the time they are curious about Americas. They are talking about Americas. They are comparing Brazil with Americas. It's very interesting because Portuguese, they are mostly nostalgic. I am now here, but in Portugal was better or wasn't. But Brazilians are not. Brazilians are now here, and they are looking at Americans, and they even when they criticize Americans, and they do a lot of this. But this is, I think, if literature can help you to better understand Brazil, I think it was there. No?
Lidia Santos, ladies and gentlemen. Lidia Santos.
Jorge Amado, the great Brazilian writer, I once interviewed him, and he said to me, and he said, look, the United States is a country where there's millions of people who aren't racist, but it's a racist country. Brazil is a country that has millions of racists, but it's not a racist country. And me personally, I don't agree. I think we both have problems, but that kind of sums up a traditional way of looking at the issue.
I agree with Larry, but I think there's a grayer fine line, literally. There's, in Brazil, between the white and the black, there's 1,000 other shades because Brazilians mixed up, very much unlike here.
Right, in the military dictatorship, there used to be a propaganda slogan on the radio, we have all the colors of the rainbow.
Yeah.
Todas as cores do arco-íris.
Yes, I think you must understand that Brazil was the last country to abolish slavery.
1888.
1888. That means this is 100 years about what that happens. Second, after the slavery, the state of Brazil did nothing at all to do with the slavers that left the system. And this is when the favelas started, because they left the rural areas and came to the cities, and they didn't have anywhere to go. And they start to occupy the hills. This is the origin of the favelas, and this we are still dealing with the problem in our urban areas. But as far as racism is concerned, I agree. I think we have different ways to treat the problem of race. The first was, again, the Brazilian state decided that looking at the population that are absolutely mixed, this is another stuff that even because Brazilians, the Portuguese, when they went to Brazil, they didn't went with the families like here. Here, the English came with the families. There, Brazil, some adventurers, they left the men there. When two centuries later, the state said, "Oh my God, it can't see. They don't know who is black, who is white." What they did, they decided that race will abolish from all documents of Brazilians. And when the census arrived in your home and said, "What color are you?" They are not asking for your race. They are asking for your color. You look at you and say, "Oh, I am, a very color they use is, I am coffee and white. Milk. I am coffee and milk. I am, I don't know, a little bit yellow. Yes, but this is, they must be, what's the question? The question is not race, the question is color. It's absolutely different. This is, I don't know, I am not denying that we have racism, but you must look at that in the Brazilian perspective.
And it's interesting that racism and the skin color is still so sensitive.
Yes.
De seu menos de braços apertado assim, colado assim, colado assim, abraços sem peixinho, sem cadinho, sem fim. É pra acabar com a cena, gosto de você vivendo sem mim. Não quero mais coisinha, gosto de mim. Tum, 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 tum,
Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, one more time, Nilson Matta, his new CD, Brazilian Voyage. Hélio Alves at HélioAlves.com. And Gretchen Palato, new CD, Lost and Found.
Thank you.
I also like to thank our panelists, Lidia Santos, Beko Dronoff, Claudia Greene, thank you, and Larry Rohter. Thank you. Thank you all. And last but not least, our co-host, if you will, our audience. Thank you so much for coming out. We really appreciate this. Thank you all for coming out. Again, this is the Global Salon Cities in Brazil, reminding you that on January 19th, Global Salon Cities in Japan. I've been your host, Eddie Robinson of WQXR and WNYC, and on behalf of the Greene Space, thegreenspace.org, New York Public Radio, and our great partners, Penn World Voices Festival, thank you all for coming out, and good night.